What's up, guys? Leaf Green Goblin here, coming at you with a pretty late night video. You guys might not see it that late. It's about midnight here. Can't really sleep, so I decided to hop on this camera and talk to you guys. Today's video is really mostly about first appearances in Pokemon and if there's ever really gonna be value or kind of a market sentiment change about it. And I guess to kind of get it out of the way before people start clicking off, this isn't really a video meant for hyping these type of cards up. But if you really want my opinion on this kind of stuff, if first appearance cards, aside from like base set, jungle, early WotC, if that type of stuff ever became really valuable, maybe it'd be like 20, 30 years, I think there'd have to be a big market sentiment shift where newer collectors are coming in with no nostalgia for earlier sets, WotC, EX era, Diamond and Pearl, and they fall in love with an older Pokemon and they want the first appearance, and maybe to them it's Japanese and they don't care that English is more expensive in, at least early WotC and EX era. I'm not so sure about Diamond and Pearl. It might be level X's might be more expensive in Japanese. Could be wrong. I actually do not know. But today I'm kind of gonna show you guys a few cards. You guys might have seen it in a live. If not, if you're a new viewer, here you guys go. I'm not showing off too many, but I've thought about this a lot, mostly because I don't really hear this. Basically, first appearances, I guess I should get the definition out of the way. So we all know first appearances like Blastoise, Charizard, the original 151. But I feel like after Gen 1, not a lot of people are really referencing first appearances when it comes to other Pokemon. When I'm browsing cards in Gen 3, Gen 4, never do I see in like an eBay description saying like, this is the first appearance of Electivire or Licky Licky. Okay, you get what I'm saying. Those Pokemon aren't the most popular, but you guys get what I'm saying here. So I wonder if maybe it's just because this is still an immature market, and that when you look across other collectibles like comics, Magic, and it's not a collectible, but people collected sneakers. When a re-release comes out, it's not as valuable as the original. And I just wonder that if there might ever become a time where, pops might not matter, the popularity of the Pokemon matters to some extent, and that there just might be some like surprising cards down the line. Like I said, 20, 30 years from now, who knows how long really, where you look at the price and you're like, whoa, like why is that so expensive? And it's like, oh, well, it's the first appearance of a Sceptile. That's probably a better example, like Gen 3, Gen 2 evolutions, or maybe like a Gen 4 legendary, like the first appearance Dialga. That type of stuff might become more valuable down the line. And it's just like, it's kind of crazy to me that I don't hear or read many people talking about it. I brought it up once or twice before in videos, in like kind of comment sections, and I just feel like people blow it off. The main thing I hear is, well, oh, first appearance just doesn't matter in Pokemon. But like I said, it matters in sports cards, it matters in all these other collectibles. And while I believe Pokemon as a pop culture collectible is pretty, I consider it a unicorn. I don't think it is, it's so unique where other collectors might not want, like you're collecting Pokemon, you're not interested in first appearances. Because for me, I got into first appearances. Yeah, the art's important, but there is value to first appearances to me, and I can give you guys some examples. So this right here is a Tyranitar from Neo 2. Got this for like 40 bucks and a 9. It's not my top 5 favorite Tyranitar art, but for the price, to have the first ever, in Japanese, there's no, around this time there was not a first edition or unlimited version of the sets. So just to have the first art ever of a Tyranitar, Pokemon I really love, there's value in that for me. Another example, not as good of an example, to be honest, but I still really love this card. This is Butler Salamence. This is a movie promo for Jirachi Wishmaker. And while this isn't the first Salamence card, it is, I guess you could say it's the art for, that movie was Salamence's first ever anime appearance. And then the last one is Typhlosion from, well, I think it's Miracle of the Desert, Japanese Sandstorm. And this is, I think there's like 6 or 7 Typhlosion arts before this, but this is the first Typhlosion art that Nintendo made. And I guess maybe that's a little, could kind of segue to that is, for example, how do I put this? One reason why I'm bullish on EX Era is that maybe down the line, even though WotC's first, because a lot of collectors might not know of Wizards of the Coast like 30 years from now, but they know about Nintendo, they care about the first appearance cards of Nintendo. Now, like I said, this at the end of the day, this might be like kind of a niche thing if it were ever to become a thing, because I bought that Typhlosion because I just love it a lot. I have the binder copy. It's one of my favorite cards. Typhlosion is one of my favorite Pokemon. The Salamence, I love Jirachi Wishmaker. And then the Tyranitar, I didn't really want to make a Neo Japanese binder, and the price it made sense for the value. Now, would I pay $500 for that card? No. So that's where you start getting into the interesting, kind of another side part about it is that when I'm talking about these first appearance cards, so for example, Typhlosion 17, it's several $1,000s in English, but the 10 in Japanese is about $400 or $500. I'm not trying to say here that in 20, 30 years, that card's going to be like $30,000. But could I see that card, outpace inflation maybe? Maybe be like a $2,000 card down the line, simply because there's a lot of people that want the first, like a gem mint condition of the first ever Typhlosion art, but they don't want to spend the money to get the English version. And on top of that, Japanese is the first print of said set or Pokemon. I don't think that's crazy. And I think what's made me more curious, like thinking about this type of topic, is we've seen in the last few years since the boom some market shifts that some people, I'm sure they called it, and then overall I think people are surprised. One example is Ultra Modern being more expensive in Japanese, and even in I guess in some mid-era sets. Like I do know, I'm not that familiar with, I don't really track Japanese prices across all sets, but for example, like I do know black and white full arts in Japanese are more expensive than in English. I don't know how many people expected that. And on top of that, vintage. I know right now there's kind of a lull. Alt arts have gone down. The Scarlet Violet, it's not selling out. And vintage as well has come down from the boom. But I think if you go back in time, the gap between demand for vintage and modern would favorably, what's the word? Lean favorably, there it is, towards vintage. And nowadays it seems like the demand is very heavy, is much heavier in modern. So when you see these kind of market shifts now, it could shift back. It could go back to, English being more expensive than Japanese. So when I think about that, I'm like, well, what about vintage Japanese? That is the OG language of those cards. Now, I know there's a lot more of those, and that's probably what's keeping it down. That's probably I could probably go on another tangent about that, is do collectors and does the market value pop a little too much? One example I can think of is in Japanese, in a lot of sets, Unlimited goes for more money than first edition because of the pops. But if you stretch this market over 50 years, are new collectors coming in, and how much of it is that people really want the rarer thing and they don't care if it's first edition or unlimited, they just want the lower pop? And how much of it is just that maybe that's just they read, Pokemon as a very popular hobby. It's fairly new. That's probably debatable. But the reason why I'm saying this is like how much of it is just people entering this hobby, getting back into it, and they just read that pop is everything, and so first edition is rarer than unlimited in English, and then when you translate it to Japanese, people don't care about the first edition, unlimited, whichever. They're still focused on the pop. So stuff like that. I know I'm kind of branching out a little from the main topic here, but just kind of going back to the market shift, it would take a big market shift, but I do think it's very interesting because, how I got into first appearances was just that I part of the reason why I do want first edition cards and I like Shadowless and all that is like that's some of the first ever Pokemon cards, but another part of it's the first ever cards of Gen 1. It just happens to be like go hand in hand. And I felt the same sentiment with like Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, and it doesn't seem to be the case. The market doesn't seem to feel the same way as I do. It seems like for first edition, base set or jungle, fossil, whatever, it's all about it being the first ever cards, not that it's the first ever 151, first ever like the cards of 151. I'm sure there are people out there that's like, this is the first ever Charizard, like I said, first ever Blastoise, Mewtwo, yada yada. But for example, like Neo, like I never hear anybody saying like this is the first Raikou card, this is the first Entei. And I wonder if maybe down the line the pops don't keep growing, or maybe they slow down in growth, or just people's newer collectors. I guess I could kind of sum it up in these words, is that I think a lot of people fail to realize that if Pokemon's really going to become more established as a pop culture collectible, there's going to have to be new collectors that don't have nostalgia for this. And I unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunately, but I feel like I always hear people saying, well, this is going to get passed on from generation to generation. My kids are going to love this stuff. Their kids are going to love it. But I just don't think that's enough. I think there's going to need to be collectors that collect comic books, sneakers, and just coins, whatever it is. And they fall in love with Pokemon art. They fall in love with a certain Pokemon. It could just be one Pokemon. And they want the first ever art. And they find out that Japanese is the first ever art. And they don't care that English is more expensive or rarer in whichever set. And I know this kind of sounds like I'm getting into like, oh, pro-Japanese, it could also just be like early WotC English. It doesn't have to be. The main reason why I keep bringing up Japanese is because for a lot of these first appearances, the Japanese is cheaper. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of how I want to end it. I don't have a lot of subscribers, but if you watch this, let me know. Like, do you guys care about first appearances? How much do you care about that kind of stuff? Is it something you think that is just a niche thing? Do you think it has anything to do with kind of how young this hobby is? Because while I do think Pokemon's been loved for a while, I'm sure before the boom, it was one of the biggest IPs, probably still the biggest IP. I am kind of curious about that. Biggest media franchise IP. Anyways, I feel like in these last couple of years, Pokemon's being taken a lot seriously, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who's dabbling in this market, whether they're a collector or an investor, really knows exactly what they want, what the consumer wants, and where this hobby is going to be down the line. It's very fun to speculate and talk about. I wish more content creators did. I feel like they're afraid to lead people down the wrong way. I mean, I kind of, even with as few subscribers as I have, I worry about that sometimes. That's why at the beginning of the video I said, I really hope nobody takes this the wrong way and thinks that these are going to be very valuable cards. It's just something where when I see like first edition starters in 10s go for as cheap as they do, and it's not like the pops are crazy, and all I hear is that, well, not a lot of people were in Madeira, or Japanese, there's more Japanese, Japanese better quality, so it grades better. And I'm just like, well, to somebody who just wants the first appearance, do they care? Are they going to care about all that? It might affect how much they're willing to spend on it, but I'm talking more from a demand perspective for the collector. So I'm not gonna lie. I think I might have said once or twice tonight. I might start doing more late night videos, honestly, for you guys. Let me know what you guys think of this. Subscribe if you want. I've noticed I have not ever said that once. Subscribe or like if you like this. Have a good night, guys, or good morning or whatever. Peace out.